this. I do genuinely and sincerely admire you, Andy Warski, for doing what you have done and for setting up this debate forum that we have long needed. But you have shown that you are true to your principles, because most skeptics will talk about things like free speech and immediately renegade upon it when some topic arises that they don't like. You, on the other hand, have been true to your principles. And so for that, in that sense, you have both surprised me and won my admiration, if it's worth anything to you. Now, let me just set out something at the end here, because you, Andy Warski, said on one of the live streams, I'm still yet to be convinced of the need for an ethno-state. And whilst I am not an advocate of an ethno-state, I want to try and explain to you why the alt-right are thinking along those lines. And here's the thing. In 30 years' time, perhaps, whites will become minorities in their own countries, right? That should be enough to make you freak out. But if it is not, let me remind you that there are certain groups about, like Black Lives Matter, Radical Islam, and the social justice warriors, who will absolutely make sure that when whites become a minority, they are a despised minority, right? Because the social justice warriors are going to rise in power in terms of getting into government and media and academia. And if whites are a minority, they will not, this is very important, they will not lessen their hatred toward whites. They will simply increase it. If Radical Islam, Black Lives Matter, and the social justice warriors feel that whites are a very weak and vulnerable minority, they will really, really go after them, right? So the thing is, you have to remember, very shortly, maybe 30 years' time, whites will become a minority in their own countries. This is hugely problematic. The second thing I will say is that we live in a democracy. We live in a democracy, but if white people are in a minority, they're essentially going to be disenfranchised from the political process. Because if all the non-whites decide to get together and vote against what is in the best interest of whites, we're completely screwed. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Could be that all the non-whites decide, they all come to a political consensus that white people should not be allowed to vote. Why? Because white privilege, because white people are Nazis, because white people are white supremacists. If they do that, they would then have a political majority who could completely disenfranchise whites from the political process. They could literally vote to bring into power the idea that white people should not be allowed to vote. So once you become a political minority, once you become a minority in your own country, that's it. It's over. It's finished. And therefore that situation has to be avoided. And the third thing is this. There is a group, an international cartel of banksters out there who want a global government. And they not only want a global government, they want a global dictatorship. And in this global dictatorship, you will not get a right, you'll not have the chance to vote, and you will not have a lot of the rights that you have under Canadian law. Now, the thing is this. If whites become minorities in their own countries, then this helps the global elite. And it works like this. The immigrants and the non-whites will always rebel against their host nation. They will rebel against Canada because Canada is a colonial power, because Canada helped the Nazis during World War II, because Canada is full of white supremacists. So the immigrants will always rebel against Canada and vote for a global government. We are seeing this in the UK with Brexit. Most of the immigrants and most of the non-whites, they basically want to stick two fingers up to Britain because Britain is a colonial power. It's racist. It's a white supremacist. It helped the Nazis during World War II. And so what they do is they vote for the European Union. They vote to join Europe and to fuck Britain over. And in joining the European Union, they're essentially voting for a European superstate which ultimately may not be democratic, and which will not entitle its citizens to the same rights that you would get under British sovereign law. And, you know, the European Union is an example of a halfway house toward global government. So this is something that you really need to think on. Anyway, like I say, big fan of this show. I do genuinely, sincerely admire you, and I think that I am both a good intellectual debater and indeed a feisty, passionate, charismatic person that I can add a lot of quality to your excellent show. Thanks very much for listening.